All right, thank you very much for tuning in. All right, so we're going to talk about the justiciability. So what does that mean? Let's say, for example, we want to file a class action, civil case, right? Class action civil case, not to, seek monetary damages, but to seek declaratory relief. Okay, so is that a thing? Can you get a class action case that will seek declaratory relief? Yes. All right. So justiciability is one of the key issues, right? This refers to the question of whether a court has the authority to hear and decide a particular issue or case. So in Canada, courts will only entertain legal disputes that are justiciable, and meaning that they involve a real or substantial controversy appropriate for judicial resolution, rather than a purely political hypothetical, academic, or moral question. And here's how justiciability applies to a proposed class action lawsuit seeking declaratory relief against physician for prescribing, birth control to minors. That's one of the issues, birth control to minors. So the issue here, the birth control to minors, is that these young ladies, as wonderful as they are incapable of processing the information necessary to make an informed decision. Why? Because the brain development is simply not there, right? The maturity is simply not there. They don't understand, combined with the fact that Dr. Dow is actually tricking them, actually deceiving them to say, yeah, it prevents pregnancy 100% of the time. Yeah, well, it doesn't, right? The conception can still occur, especially in these young, and extremely fertile, right? They just have to, dance with a boy at the high school dance, and they get pregnant, right? That's how fertile they are, right? But the problem here with these birth control pills is they are impossible. The girls are impossible to actually consent. It is legally, what is informed consent? Well, first of all, Dr. Dow would have to say, well, listen, okay, there's a percentage of a time where your ovaries, right, your ovaries will, the oocyte will be, will be exited out of the ovary, right, and the conception can happen, right? So, um, not to mention this is a time where these young ladies should be, very, very taught that keeping their knickers on is a, very, very important thing at this, stage of their lives prior to their marriages and all this stuff. But no, you get this, this Dr. Dow here saying, "Oh no, that's okay. You can experiment and do all kinds of stuff, and there's no risk. You can do whatever you want. Of course, I mean, there's a huge risk, and the risk is that these drugs will cause early abortion, right? The pregnancy can still occur, and the boy or baby girl will die at the later stage of implantation, right? So that's terrible. Okay, so the question here, for example, one of the arguments would be the birth control pills to minors. They cannot consent. They just cannot consent. They cannot. Informed consent is not there, and that's a huge part of the medical ethics and all this stuff. The birth control to minors without disclosing its abortifacient potential, in addition to the underdeveloped, 15-year-old. I've seen 15-year-old, 16-year-old, 17-year-old girls, take these birth control pills. I've seen it. So don't tell me it's not a thing because I've seen it with my own eyes. I've had girlfriends when I was in high school that were taking the pills. Yeah. So legal rights at stake. So to be a justiciable case, right? So this is we're talking about the justiciability here, right? So this is what it's all about here. To do what? To This is for a class action lawsuit for declaratory relief, right? Sorry, to be justiciable, the case must involve the determination of legal rights or obligations. In your proposed case, right, the plaintiff, right, this is the minor patients or their guardians, parents or guardians, could argue that the physicians violated their constitutional rights, and the common law principle of informed consent, right? So this is really where it is over here. Um, I whatever the charter is, they make it up as they go. So, I mean, if something's clearly, unconstitutional, well, yeah, whatever. But it's so hard with Canada because anything can be interpreted and all this stuff. It's annoying to me, right? It's not, clear, right? But this is very, very clear that. These young girls are physically incapable. Their brain power doesn't go that far, right? I'm not saying they're not, wonderful or intelligent or very, wonderful, human beings. They are. They're great. We love these girls. But their brain power is legally speaking, their reasoning doesn't go as far as to dictate that, taking these birth control pills can cause an early abortion, and they can consent to that, right? So, but they don't even, they don't, that doesn't go. Let's take a young girl, right? 15-year-old, 16-year-old girl goes into Dr. Dell's office, right? Does she even begin to talk about that? No, no, no. These pills just prevent pregnancy. Here he goes, signs it, and on to the next customer. Notice I didn't say a patient, it's a customer. All right, so let's continue on. All right, so you got the healthcare consent laws and all that stuff, and this requires an understanding and voluntary agreement, especially in cases involving minors. Now, this would generally meet the first requirement of justiciability, a serious legal issue grounded in his existing law, sufficient adversarial context. So the dispute must not be academic; it must involve real parties with adverse legal interests. In this case, if individuals or families claim actual harm, psychological, physical, spiritual, or moral injury, right, as a result of being prescribed these drugs without full disclosure. And that's the problem here. They were just being prescribed these drugs, and they were taking these drugs not knowing that there was going to be a death. Right? First of all, there's a legit pregnancy, right? The baby is here. Congratulations. Now this young 15-year-old mother, right, that she could have, just simply kept her knickers on, is now a mother. But then, these birth control caused the abortion. What kind of nonsense is that, right? It's really, really terrible, right? This is a serious matter. And there's likely an adequate adversarial context. So this is, when you got this, they're trying to determine justiciability. There's going to be some tests, and this is, this would likely meet the requirements of it would meet the it would pass the test, if you will. Yeah. So class action enhances this by pooling similar claims and presenting a unified legal front. So the court may be more receptive to the justiciability of a narrowly defined class of claimants who receive specific pills without informed consent, and suffered identifiable harms. Now, see, the problem is, what is this identifiable harm? Can you be completely unaware that this happened to you and still it be an identifiable harm? Yes, yes, and that's the thing, right? These pills cause early abortion, and these young, ladies don't even understand that, there was a baby, inside of their womb, well, the fallopian tube there, the womb, whatever, just call it a womb, and that the baby, failed to implant inside the uterine lining, right? So they don't even, they're ignorant to that fact. Also, the dad, is unaware of that fact. The young, ignorant, 16 or 17-year-old, that I used to be, that I used to have these girlfriends, and we used to, do that kind of stuff. And I should have never done that kind of stuff. These young ladies were not interested in keeping their knickers on at the time. I don't know what kind of parents they had, but they certainly were not. And I was very young at the time, and I was doing that kind of stuff, which I shouldn't have been doing, but I did. And I certainly was unaware of the fact that my child could have been conceived, because these pills don't prevent a pregnancy. They certainly don't. And pregnancy, don't get me started on, will prevent, the starting of a pregnancy is the implantation. It's not, right? So don't even start with that. The starting of the pregnancy is the conception, where the zygotic genome activation occurs, right? So this blastocyst failed to implant. Get out of there. No, get out of here with that nonsense. I don't even want to go there anymore, because that has been debunked, adequate. This debunking of that argument is clear, right? It's clear. This is adequate. It's an adequate, debunked, it's dispelled. That argument is dispelled, right? The conception is 100% clear from the conception. All right, so these identifiable harms, they have suffered identifiable harms, even if they don't really know it, but they did, rather than a broad political statement against contraception. This is not a political question. So courts generally avoid deciding a purely political or ideological issue, and if the case were framed as birth control should be banned, or no minor should ever be prescribed contraceptives regardless of circumstance, it might be deemed as non-justiciable, right? So, and as a political and moral debate, better left to Parliament or medical colleges. But to keep the case justiciable, it should be framed, it must be framed around specific legal breaches by specific professionals under specific statutory and constitutional standards. For example, Dr. Gao prescribed this birth control pill to a 14-year-old girl without disclosing the abortifacient mechanism, violating informed consent and statutory duty under, this kind of thing, right? Under just, our conscience. We know that this is right, but there's probably, some sort of act that says it's okay to do that, and then they're going to get away with it because you know how Canada is, right? They got all these acts and everything to keep the machine going, right? So, would we even gain anything from filing this kind of class action declaratory relief case? Maybe we would, even if we lose. But if and like I talked about in my other video, if we lose, then the Court of Appeal is going to just rubber stamp it, and the Supreme Court of Canada is going to be like a 0.1% chance that they might take it. Let's say, for example, the Supreme Court of Canada takes the case. Well, it may be, the chances are, very low that we'll actually win because this country's so far gone. But, it doesn't matter if you're right in this country. It really doesn't matter if you're right. Let's continue on. Declaratory relief as a recognized remedy. Declaratory relief is available in Canada to clarify the legal rights and duties of parties. Courts are often open to hearing declaratory actions in areas involving public interest or constitutional rights if the above elements are satisfied. However, a class action seeking only declaratory relief with no damages or injunction injunction, is such like an injunction. That means you have to stop doing this, right? An injunction, that means like don't do this, right? Stop doing this right now. Is rare, right? This would be rare, but it must pass an extra test. Does the declaration serve a real practical purpose? And to satisfy that, you could argue that the core declaration that a court declaration such as prescribing practices were unconstitutional or unlawful would protect future minors, clarify legal standards for physicians, empower patients and families to make informed choices, and justify regulatory or institutional changes. A case like as this could be, it can be justiciable, provided that it is focused on specific legal violations, and it's anchored in real harm, 100% real harm, yeah, experienced by real individuals, right? Seeks appropriate and judicially manageable relief, and avoids overboard and purely ideological framing. Which it doesn't, right? This is not about beliefs. This is certainly about the real possibility of a conception and the 100%, the baby being 100% a baby boy or baby girl that will die at the later very healthy stage and natural stage of implantation. Now, this is a zygotic genome activation. This is a baby, right? This is a baby. Courts will resist sweeping pronouncements on cultural, religious, or political values, but they will engage with cases where doctors may have violated medical standards or legal consent requirements, especially involving minors. All right, so very, very good. We'll talk a little bit more about these kinds of chances here in a few minutes. Thank you very much for tuning in. I'll see you in a few minutes.